Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As you come in, please hit the like button. I would really appreciate it. Um, the Derek Chauvin trial has just ended. It is now in the hands of a jury, and I did see the closing arguments. And listen, first and foremost, I'm going to be obviously 100% honest, as I always am, when it comes to well, in general, anyway. I'm very pessimistic. I think at best he'll get they're going to get the lesser charge, something like 5 to 10 years. Um, I just have very little faith when it comes to these juries and when it comes to these verdicts, especially in dealing with the race soldiers. I refuse to call guys like Derek Chauvin police because they're not really police. What they are just pure race soldiers, pure and simple. And you saw the defense today. Um, they really they just lied so much. And if I hear the term responsible officer again, I'm going to lose it because that man and the defense attorney's name was Eric Nelson. He referred to Derek Race Soldier Chauvin as a quote unquote responsible officer. I mean, no responsible officer I know is going to keep a knee on somebody's neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. That is not, counselor, um, what you call a reasonable officer. Okay. In fact, counselor, let me tell you something. Why don't you come over here? Let me put my knee on your neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds and let me show you how responsible I am. Okay. I mean, the amount of garbage that was spewed by this particular defense attorney. I mean, he was just downright insulting. He really was. I mean, it was just absolutely ridiculous. Um, and again, this is what you expect in these so-called trials. It is really, it is an abomination. It really is. But here, in my opinion, lies the bigger issue. And trust me, no one has brought these things up. But let's look at this jury that will be deliberating, the makeup of this jury. And it's going, I'm telling you, this to me looks like it's going to be, it looks like we're getting set up for another one. It really does. And you know what I'm talking about. And when I say another one, I'm talking about another Eric Gardner, another Michael Brown, another Sean Bell, another Amadou Diallo, another Rodney King. Listen, I'll go out of breath if I keep talking about the amount of BS verdicts that we've gotten when it comes to these race soldiers. Now, let's break down the 14 jurors, which are the 12 jurors and the two alternates. And obviously, the names are not going to be available, but what will be available are their characteristics and how they allegedly think. Now, here's juror number one. He is described as a white man in his 20s or 30s who works as a chemist and said he has an analytical mind. Juror number two is a woman of mixed race who appears to be in her 20s or 30s. She said that she was super excited about getting the jury questionnaire form. Juror number 3 is described as a white man in his 30s who works as an auditor. He says he supports Black Lives Matter in the general context, but doesn't like everything they have done. Juror number 4 is described as a Black man in his 30s or 40s who moved to the US 14 years ago and works in information technology. He said that he had a, quote, somewhat negative, unquote, opinion of Chauvin, that he strongly disagreed with defunding the police and that police make him feel safe. Juror number 5 is a white woman in her 50s. She said she has a somewhat negative impression of Chauvin and believes there are biases against African Americans, but not everyone in the system is bad. She said she felt empathy for Floyd as well as the officers because, quote, at the end of the day, I'm sure that the intention was not there for this to happen, unquote. You have got to be kidding me about juror number 5. I guess 9 minutes and 29 seconds wasn't enough intent for juror number 5. Juror number 6 is described as a Black man in his 30s who said he had very favorable views of Black Lives Matter. He also said he thought Chauvin had no intention of harming anyone, but he said he could put that opinion aside in this case. Juror number 7 is described as a white woman in her 50s. She had a, quote, somewhat negative, unquote, impression of Chauvin and wrote she got the impression he didn't care about Floyd. Juror number 8 is a Black man in his 40s who works in management. He said he had a neutral opinion of Chauvin and had a, quote unquote, somewhat favorable view of both Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter. Juror number 9 is described as a woman of multiple/mixed race in her 40s who said she has a somewhat negative opinion of Chauvin, but feels safe because of police in her neighborhood, the court said. The court initially incorrectly stated her race as white, but she says that she identifies as multiple or mixed race. Juror number 10 is described as a white woman in her 50s who works as a nurse. She said police in her community make her feel safe, but she noted that Black and minority people are not always treated fairly in the criminal justice system. Juror number 11 is described as a Black woman and grandmother in her 50s or 60s who once lived about 10 blocks from where Floyd died. She has a relative who is a Minneapolis police officer and said she somewhat agrees that Black people are not always treated fairly in the criminal justice system. Juror number 12 is described as a white woman in her 40s who works in commercial insurance. She has a healthy respect for police officers and a somewhat favorable opinion of Black Lives Matter. Now, here are the 2 alternate jurors. Juror number 13 is described as a white woman in her 50s. Until recently, she worked in customer service in a suburban business that was damaged in the unrest after Floyd's death. She said she had a somewhat negative view of Chauvin, but generally trusts police and believes people who follow their instructions have nothing to fear. And finally, well, actually, they have 15 jurors slated here. Juror number 14 is described as a white woman in her 20s who works as a social worker. She said that she had neutral views of Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter and strongly disagrees about defunding the police. Juror number 15 is described as a white man in his 20s who works as an accountant, and he was chosen in case of an absence but was excused prior to the start of opening statements. Now, during the questioning, the defense and prosecution were able to ask the court to dismiss prospective jurors for cause if they believed the person could not be fair or impartial. Prosecutor, excuse me, let me start that again. Prosecutors and defense attorneys were also able to dismiss prospective jurors without cause using what's called a, a preemptory challenge. Chauvin's team was allowed 18 of these challenges and used 14. The prosecution was allowed 10 and used 8. The defense generally used its strikes on people who expressed negative views of Chauvin and positive views of Black Lives Matter, while the prosecution generally used its strikes on white people who expressed support for the police. Now, this is care of the Mercury News, and that was back in March 29th. Now, right now, the jury is still deliberating, and they have been deliberating for 36 minutes and now 35 seconds. Again, I do not. And if you want to say that I'm very pessimistic, well, let's face it, I definitely have reason to be pessimistic. I've already laid out the foundation as to why I am pessimistic with this. Now, I will more than likely have another live stream when the verdict is in. But let me leave you something with something that was said by the AG, Jerry Blackwell, when he brought up, remember, the defense brought up that maybe George Floyd's heart was enlarged, and that was one of the factors as to why he passed away. But I think Mr. Blackwell said it best, that it is not about the big heart of George Floyd, but about the little heart of one Derek Chauvin. Thank you so much for joining me, ladies and gentlemen. UncleClaude signing out. Please like, share, and subscribe. Take care, everyone. God bless, and let's hope that we have the right verdict.